Have you ever noticed in sports, especially baseball, but others as well, how white players tend to look down on showboating while other players look like they're actually having fun? Are we ever going to stop arguing about touchdown celebrations? What I bet you didn't know is that there are historical reasons for it. Yes, it's about race and religion, but not in the ways that you might think. So if you're MAGA, don't leave thinking this is some woke BS. Understanding this might help us in unlocking the problems with young men. Most sports were developed during the Industrial Revolution and really thanks to unions. For the first time, people had the same time off, and people tended to live in closer quarters as opposed to life on the farm. So sports filled the void. During the Victorian era, educators and religious leaders started to promote a philosophy called muscular Christianity. They were worried that sedentary office work was making men weak and undisciplined. This is when organizations like the YMCA were formed in order to use sports to mold young men to become good citizens. They thought men were becoming too feminine. Sound familiar? They needed that grit to fight wars and run businesses. So sports became like the military so boys could prove their courage and toughness, to take pain without complaining, to listen to authority without questioning it. Schools and universities soon adopted sports, and it became a source of pride to see the strength of our young men, something we know Donald Trump happens to love.
Look at this guy over here. I don't know who the hell he is, but he is one hell of a specimen. This is one hell of a physical specimen. I thought I was big until I met you, Joe. You know, you're fantastic. That's what I like.
For Black Americans, the experience with sports was much different, of course. They didn't have a crisis of masculinity because they weren't working those office jobs. They were generally in factories with immigrants doing hard labor. So instead, sports became a way for them to prove themselves in white society. It was a doorway to show the world their humanity and discipline, and it was capped off with Jesse Owens in Berlin. It also became a way for them to show that they could run organizations and institutions, which is where the Negro Leagues came from. But sports also served as one of the first post-slavery forms of community. Sports was a break from their difficult lives, and so it brought joy and community solidarity, something that was central to the civil rights movement. For Latinos, yet a different experience. People think countries like Mexico got baseball from the US, but it's not true. Countries like Cuba, Mexico, and Puerto Rico used baseball as a form of anti-colonial resistance against Spain. See, the preferred game for the Spanish was bullfighting, and so this was a non-violent, peaceful alternative. In fact, baseball games became a place for workers to organize. They could talk about things like potential labor strikes away from their bosses. But similar to Black Americans, it was something that brought joy and solidarity. As with the Negro Leagues, the Mexican leagues put a crack in the white superiority complex when they would consistently beat white teams. And then finally, Asian Americans. Japanese Americans generally played baseball, while Chinese and Filipino Americans usually played basketball. For Asian Americans, a lot of this was about loyalty, and so you do see some of the same traits as white Americans. They were trying to prove their Americanness, and so they modeled themselves after white players oftentimes. But like Black and Latino players, it was also an escape. In fact, one of the first things that Japanese Americans did in the internment camps in World War II was to build dirt baseball fields. So while there's, of course, many exceptions, and over the years each race has influenced each other, you can see why each of them plays their game a little bit differently. So if you're a white pitcher out there and a Latino player happens to showboat a little bit after hitting a home run off of you, instead of getting all butthurt, maybe you could learn something. Because if you're honest with yourself, you'll see that we want the game to be fun too. When you know, you know.